Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon, with another episode of Dark Rhino Security, Security Confidential. And today we have another rock star guest joining us. He is Philippe Umo. He joins us all the way from France. He is the CEO and founder of CrowdSec. Check them out. It's an open source multiplayer firewall that's able to analyze visitor behavior and provide an adapted response to all kinds of attacks. Very cool. And there's a huge open source component to it. He is using crowd power to generate a global IP reputation database to protect user networks. We're going to hear about more of that here in a minute. But also, what you may not know about Philippe is that he has created 5 startups, seeded 10 of them, which is amazing. And in his spare time, he's a public speaker and a drone pilot and likes to ride horses. Welcome to the show, Philip.
Thank you, Mayor. You know a lot about me, and I also love pinballs, but that's for another conversation, I guess.
I do too. I've wanted to get a real pinball machine, and a real one, not a digital one, an old one, the analog kind with a steel ball. Well, you got 4 of them.
I got 4 of them. I do.
Those are so much fun.
Yes, they are. And now, timeless and for all generation, I see my kid or these friends playing on them. And, it's not digital yet. They are totally fascinated. So, our world still has good stuff.
Oh, it is. I mean, the mechanical clanging, bouncing around, and all the lights and alarms going off. That was my generation growing up. So I guess I dated myself. There we go. So, Philip, one place we want to start, given all the tremendous work you've done, we want to know your origin story because we think you were a network engineer at one time, and then you left a job to become an entrepreneur and become self-employed. How did that happen? Give us a little backstory here of
Yeah, sure.
how
I
did that
think,
transition.
the transition is natural somehow because there is 5% of the population that is actually made not to work for others, but try to get the group to work with them. This is the natural leadership or something like this. And it dates back from the ancient time, Cro-Magnon and things like this. If everybody
Yes.
would be leading, then the group would die. If nobody would be leading, then the group would die. And there are
Yeah.
so many cases where the group would die that nature decided that 5% would lead and the other would help build, organize, discuss, exchange, sometimes have headache because they were precursors of potential problems and hazards in the environment. So people that nowadays have headaches are the one that were the sensitive person in the groups that would detect the weather changes. Did you know about that? So
I did
if you
not
ask me,
know this. This is fantastic. Keep going, please.
so if you tell me where it comes from a long, long time ago, but more precisely and more accurately, it dates back from my 14th or 15th. I told my parents, I don't want to be working for someone. I want to run a company of my own and have my group working together. And I'm pretty sure I can do that. So my parents had the only reaction they could have, say, finish your study first. And they were right. So I made my engineering, right? And during this time, I met with an incredible person. And this one guy was the one cracking games on Atari ST computer. So we had those
Really?
games, and being kids, 10-year-old or 12-year-old, we had no budget to buy games actually. So we are having those cracked games that we would exchange through the post office, right? And every time I would load a game, I would see this logo of this guy, it was running around in circles. And I
Yeah.
was like, I cracked it. And I was like, wow, those guys, this group is so impressive. Fast forward in time, I'm during my engineering studies with this guy. I meet him physically and he's a student too in the same school as I. And wow, it's you. Yeah, it's me. So you were the one cracking the games I was playing when I was a kid,
Wow.
being 10. Yes. But how old were you? Well, 10. Sorry, you were cracking game in assembler. You were 10. Yes. What are you doing today? I'm doing cybersecurity. Show me the
Oh,
fucking rabbit hole.
wow.
Show me the rabbit hole. Show me
Oh,
how
man.
deep this thing goes, right? So this is how I came to like security. So I was working for a bank during my student time. I didn't like it so much. And I decided to create my company right after school. It was 2000. people were paid a hefty amount of gold to just join a company as engineers. I was like, no, I'm going to do it my way. So ate pasta, drink beers, but not much money in the pocket. And then, this company took off slowly but surely. And after 17 years, I sold it and created a new venture.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and during this time, I was pretty much endorsing all the roles, but the one I liked the most was pen tester. I did a lot of red team pen tests. So by then it was like, do whatever you want as long as you get in and you tell us how. It was basically the contract, So it was a lot of fun, a lot of learning curve. I loved it. And then I switched to the business side like 10 years ago, doing business development, being CSO, being CMO and stuff like that. Love it too. So I'm kind of a hybrid profile that betrayed the technical front to become the the dark side guy that does business.
I don't know if you betrayed them. I think it's an inspiring story because, there's this impression that, especially in cybersecurity, that there's a back room of people in hoodies that are just working and you never see them. And it shows that if you want to be daylighted, you can be daylighted and you can be what you want to be if you have the perseverance and the intention of doing it.
And most of us, we need variety, otherwise the mind gets bored. And when you get bored, you're not that good.
Oh,
And on top of that, being a pen tester, you can only be that kind of person for eventually 8 to 10 years, because after you have a family, you have friends, you cannot dive continuously into new exploits, new techniques, and so on. And you just have to settle down and let pass this to someone else. And I had a very brilliant right arm, and the guy took over and is now my CTO, by the way.
that's fantastic. And that is the number if you go back and look at some of our old episodes, there's been a lot of people, younger people that we've had on that wanted to start their life off as pen testers. It seems to be the number one thing in cyber. It's like, I want to be a pen tester. I want to be an ethical hacker. That's the term everybody uses. But you're absolutely right. And for our listeners, take his advice seriously, because that's absolutely correct. After a while, you do get bored and you do have to settle down. And it's a profession where you have to be on top of your game all the time. And it's just the way it is.
Mm.
So, there's a lot of people who think about becoming an entrepreneur and want to be a leader. What do you think are the biggest hurdles in making that transition? It seems for you it was natural. You're a natural leader, but still there must have been some hurdles.
Yeah, I like history in this, and I had the chance to be able to connect when I decided I would take these things in hands. And I was 6, so I was actually the age of my kid currently. And what happened is, the school is we were bullied by taller, stronger kids that was doubling their years and tripling their years, and they were just taller and wider. So we couldn't do much, and I was tired about that. And at some point in the schoolyard, I decided I would federate everyone and put them, in front of their reality. We were 50, they were 3. So they would lose the game. So at some point, we were only stopped from hanging them because the teacher were like, what the heck is happening here? And they saw the 50 of us circling the 3 guys. And that day, it changed my personality deeply and forever. I understood 2 things. One, if you want to win over these kind of problems, you have to team together. And 2, if you can be the leader of it, it's even better. So this was a life-changing experience. And I just,
Wow.
Years after, a shrink found it in my personality. So that was very interesting. And then, what it
Wow.
takes is, and the weird thing is, people think you're not adapting because you're CEO, you're the one selling the story, you're the one, on the TV, sets and stuff. But the reality is you adopt. You're adopting constantly. It's your role to not be sure about something, being disbalanced about something, and find solution against that disbalance. And where people expect you to be comfortable and confident on everything, internally, at least for myself, I'm adopting. And I cannot show I'm adopting, whereas I should adopt constantly. And this is a very tricky situation where you shouldn't get too confident with yourself. You should always take in consideration whatever is happening around you and your surrounding, what's going well or wrong, what could go wrong also in the future. Anticipate those and lead the team without doubting or without showing any doubt to them. Show that you know the past, you know where you're heading, and so on. So it's an interesting mix of schizophrenia somewhere.
What you're describing is you have to be very comfortable with being uncomfortable
Exactly.
and making sure on the outside you are very directing that it doesn't show through. And I think that is the part that many people psychologically struggle with, that we've seen. When you're thinking about leaving a comfortable job that gives you a salary every 2 weeks and you're going to give that up for an unknown, that's not an easy decision to make. And if you make it, a lot of times people find they weren't cut out to do it.
Yeah, and reciprocally, if you live in a job that is paying every 2 weeks, but you're not, you feel uncomfortable, you feel you don't belong here, like in the Matrix, there's a bug, something, you're like, you don't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. It means you were not meant for that. And I tried to be an employee. I really honestly tried and always failed. Honestly, it's not made for me. I cannot be an employee. And that doesn't work. And nowadays, I think the entrepreneurship evolved a lot. Startups evolved a lot. So if you are a professional and have, skin in the game or tech skills that are unique or whatever, you should ask to have shares. Meaning this company is as much my company that it is my coworker company. They all have shares in the game. Meaning it's a totally different thing of being a leader of someone that is partaking into an adventure and will get fruits out of it, and not just you, but you're leading them because they accept your leadership because they think you're the
Yep.
person proper and fit for that job. But on the other end, they are also enriching themselves and not just you, which is super important now that the workforce is shifting toward retirement. So on average, there will be one person retired for one active person in 20 years from now in most countries, in most modern countries. So meaning the people that are now coming in the market are gold, pure gold. So you cannot hire them on a chip, and you cannot not associate them if they have the skills and the competencies. So obviously, it changed totally the way you perceive entrepreneurship and the way you should react and interact with people.
The model you're describing, there was another gentleman way back when that people may be familiar with, and you might be familiar with, Tom Siebel, who started Siebel Systems.
No, I don't know him directly, not personally.
No, he became, he eventually sold his company to Oracle, and
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of millionaires created in his organization, and he gave the option to his employees of taking whatever percentage of their salary they wanted as shares in the company.
Mm.
So there were some people who took their entire income as shares in the company, and when the company went public, it
Created millionaires.
yeah, it created, I remember his admin, it was millions and millions and millions of dollars, and I don't think she's an admin anymore. But that's but it's a story that dates back about 2 decades, and that was the first that I had ever heard of that model that you're describing now. Uh, and I think you're absolutely right. We see a vacuum in the market space. Cybersecurity is an area where the demand for people is far outstrips supply of available good talent. That So people need to be creative, and you want people to be a part of your organization, right? You don't want them to just be employees. You want them to feel like they're a part of something.
Yeah, absolutely. Specifically when you run a company that is based on a crowd and on a community. I mean, if you don't act like this internally, you don't drink your own potion. And besides, we are selling, knowledge. And there is one thing that is absolutely fantastic with knowledge. The more you share it, the more you enrich yourself. It's not like, a physical good. If you split it, you have just half of it, right? But knowledge, the more you share it, exactly what you're doing with this podcast, actually, man. The more you share it, the more you enrich yourself. And that's why dealing with virtual goods like this, with data or with knowledge, is so enriching.
Uh, Very well said. So let's talk about cybersecurity. I believe I read somewhere while we were researching your background that you use the term, quote, that a lot of people take the Captain America approach to cybersecurity. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, so for the last 40 to 50 years, what we see is all type of organization, big and small, no matter the budget, being breached. And the way I interpret it, it's the following. They defend on a stance that is something like along those lines. They create a super soldier. So this corporate entity create a super soldier with tremendous tools, which could be laser eyes, with
Sure.
fantastic data, the goggles that see through things, the X-ray goggles, and then they have the Batmobile, and then they have the Captain America shield and the jetpack and everything. But there are still one soldier, super equipped soldier, okay, but one soldier against an army. And what proved true over the years is that when you fight alone against an army, except in Hollywood, you die. Period. You lose.
Yeah,
That's all. And
absolutely.
that's exactly what's happening. So the CrowdSec approach is the following. If you want to beat an army, you need a bigger army. And since we are numbering the guys 10,000 to 1, I mean the bad guys 10,000 to 1, we have an edge here that we need to leverage to beat them at their own game because we are just more numerous. And it narrows down to another problem. It's about complex and complicated. There is a misunderstanding about the cybersecurity problem. People think it's a complicated problem. A complicated problem is like Einstein solving gravity with relativity, special relativity, right? So this was a
Yeah.
complicated problem for sure. But a complicated problem can be solved by one person, extremely smart, okay, but one person, one genius. A complex problem is sending people to the moon. Even though you're Einstein and super smart, there's no chance you send anybody to the moon, even though you know about gravity, because you need a lot of different skill set to be able
Right.
to put together, assemble a rocket, put people inside and send it to the moon. And for the last 40 years, we treated the cybersecurity problem as a complicated one, whereas it's a complex one. That's why here again, we need collaboration.
That's a very interesting way to look at it. So more of a beehive approach,
Absolutely.
right? If we were going to be analogous to something, and that and it's a complex versus complicated. Yeah, we see that a lot. And you look at the biggest. You mentioned, you look at all the breaches. These companies, J.P. Morgan, CNA, I think, uh, or I'm sorry, not CNA, AIG got breached. Target got breached. These organizations have immense budgets and immense departments, and they're still not able to mount a complete defense.
No,
And
no.
I don't think they ever will. I mean, personally, there's always going to be vulnerabilities that are unknown. That's just the way life goes. So you can't secure everything. But what does your approach to address that issue, where that world of unknown unknowns, those 0 days, those things that if you are taking the approach of a beehive, um, where someone is exploiting something that you don't know about, how do you think your approach addresses that, or does it not?
Well, specifically, the unknown is a complex thing because you know what you don't know, obviously, but what we know for sure, I'd rather go from the point where what we know. And what we know is there's an infinite number of domain names. You just have to have a number after it, and domain names are
Okay.
infinite. Okay, there's
Okay.
an infinite number of hash because if you change one byte into a malware, it's a different hash, right? So
Yep.
domain name hashes are an infinite number. IP addresses are infinite number. Great number, but finite, nevertheless. So
Yes.
this is what you could consider a resource. And this resource is precious to cyber criminals. This is point one. And what they do is they use those resources to scan you, to inject malwares, to try passwords, to scalp product from a website, to enumerate numbers from a VoIP system, to check credit card numbers, and so on. Every attack has one common point in the world. It's carried through a public IP address,
Yes.
right? Or not every, because there are Bluetooth and stuff like that. But if we exclude those things, like publicly speaking, over the internet, there is one common point. Everybody use an IP address to reach out that target. So what we are looking at is a way to shrink the number of IP addresses they can use by burning them as soon as we detect them on a large scale and releasing them as soon as we know it's clean and it's not used anymore by a cyber criminal. So meaning if the guy buys a VPN access and use it, okay, he's going to use it for, I don't know, an hour, 2 hour, 2 days, 3 months, whatever.
Yeah.
So we will see it on the radar because the network is so big nowadays. We have hundreds of thousands of machines running, reading their logs and checking if an IP address is commonly attacking a lot of people. And if we see this kind of address, we'll burn it. When it's burnt, most likely the cyber criminal will release it and change to a new one. But the point is, the network is so big and so, quick to react that we will burn the new one extremely quickly as well. So the goal of CrowdSec is to use the crowd to have a fully dynamic block list.
Okay. And wow, and you're addressing this at the most fundamental level, which is the IP address, because everything has to originate from somewhere, and that is the origination point.
Yeah, and it's a scarce resource. So this is where we strike.
Makes a lot of sense. And why open source though? Why do it with open source?
Yeah, because actually money is the first friction to adoption. Whatever you're doing in life, if you have to pay, it's a friction. So if Waze would have cost back in the day just $10, it would have never become Waze in the first place. So friction, this friction we want to remove. So let's make it free, right? Because the product is made to gather signals, and what we sell is the data. So the product as such, we gather signals, has to be free. Makes sense. So if it's free, let's make it open source as well, because we were open sourcer forever. We are really interested in this community and this thought process. So we said, okay, let's make it open source so that people can contribute and that they can check that it's not a new SolarWind in the making. SolarWind was this editor that,
Yeah.
actually had closed source and it was rigged and the people used their product and they were backdoored and so on. Not because SolarWind wanted it, it's because they were compromised. Here,
Yes, they were.
the source code is open and you can check it. And by the way, it has been audited many times. So we know it's clean. So you can install it on your software, hardware, wherever you want. You can put it in a box. You can adapt it to whatever context you have.
So then two questions on that, and I think you started to direct us to an answer on one of them, but I'm still going to ask it directly, is how do you then monetize an open source platform? And secondly, how do you control the development cycle on an open source platform to where if you're able to monetize it, a paying customer is going to be expecting regular updates?
Yeah, so I'll tackle the second one if you okay, and then go to the first one. So on
Okay.
the aspect of how we deal with our roadmap, obviously the community has been influencing a lot the roadmap, and now clients are also influencing the roadmap because they say we need this Palo Alto connector. So typically
Okay.
Palo Alto, if you're using it, you're probably a large company. So you're probably not on the free plan. So obviously the community didn't ask for it directly, but the power users and the company were asking for it. So it's a constant arbitration in between what we're doing ourselves and what we deem is worthy of our time or our clients are asking. But it's not so complicated to put together actually as a balance because the team is large enough because we have revenues. And the revenues that are coming from companies that want to get the global picture on a constant basis. So if you use a free product, you're protected by the community block list, by the product itself. But if you are a premium member or an enterprise grade client, you would get real time information about new IPs popping on the radar or disappearing. You would have access not only to the 25,000 or 35,000 IPs that are in the block list, but to the 15 million we know about. You will have premium services you can leverage online with a SaaS console, which is super cool. You can, act on decision, delete them, add them, include other block lists you already have from other sources. So we provide extra services, and obviously we retain all the attacks that were sent against you. 7 days for free, 1 year if you're paying. So it's pretty easy to cut, to have a line in the sand saying, guys, we're offering a tone lot for free. Now you understand that we also have to make money. So this is the line in the sand. And on this side of the line, it's
Okay.
paying. And honestly, the community was very understanding on that. They were scared at the very beginning, thinking, oh, it's too good to be true. It's too good to be free. Now that they understand the model, they're okay with it because they say, okay, we'll never be screwed up because, the guys are clean with their model. We know where they make money.
So that leads to another couple things here. Third party risk, and this we've seen come up multiple times, just anecdotally in our own discussions with prospects, where when you introduce the notion of open source, there's some companies that have legal teams and departments that get very anxious with open source because they're like, it represents a third-party risk that we can't hold anybody accountable for, because it is open source, it's crowdsourced. So
Yeah, it's true. It's accountability is one thing, but you're held accountable for something only if you are making specific promises around it. Here in open source, what we promise it's free. The code is open. You can check into it. The licenses we are using are not leaky, meaning if a license has another model than our own, we are not infected by the license model. So we are MIT license, and if someone is using a federal license, for example, we won't use their product or their components because we don't want to have a leak in between the licenses. We want it to be clean. Now, premium users are getting support. They have support from our company. We have a team to help them, and we are accountable for that. Now, the free users that are using the MIT license, it's like if you're using a Debian. It's for free. You don't get any support. We're not responsible for what you do with the product, but it's free. So it's up to you also to assume that part.
very good. I'm glad you answered it that way, because I'm sure there's some people out there that can make use of that. When we say it, nobody believes us, but hopefully coming from you,
it's an extremely powerful model because, even though it's free, we are building on the shoulder of giants, and it's exactly what Einstein said when he was creating his theory. He said, so many brilliant people have been there before me, and I'm building on the shoulder of giants. It's exactly what we're doing. I mean, this open source model was existing before us. It will exist after us, and people will stack on what we've done to create their own product, and as we did with their own product as well and tools. Now, the assembly of all of this is so freaking powerful. Come on, is the Mars rover running anything else than open source? When I am
no,
asked, where open source is going, it's already on Mars, for God's sake. So where do you want it to go?
It's actually ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
People don't realize their appliances are using open
Yeah.
source software.
Yeah, most of the internet is based on open source software. There is, to my knowledge, there is no private license that is not including at some point somewhere some part of open source. Just doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore. I agree. You wouldn't build, even if it's a private license. There's so many great open source libraries available. Why would you reinvent
the wheel?
The wheel.
Absolutely. And that's the point. I mean, if you're running a Linux system or a BSD system, you are probably using something like 60,000 different type of components that are for free, that are open source, all combined together. So your OS is a patchwork of open source. And in Windows, there are so many licenses open source that are used as well.
So you just announced a big Series A round, and congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
But when you went to the VC community, was there trepidation on their part with open source? And when?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
So how did you climb that mountain?
With pain and sweat. But basically, I had to pitch for my seed round 48 different VCs, and for my A round something similar, something like 50 VCs. You can take for granted that half of them won't get the model and will chicken out, and the other one are looking at you like a UFO. So either they are willing to take the risk and thinking, okay, this. I mean, why haven't we applied the concept of network effect to cybersecurity? It's so obvious it has to exist already. I'm taking the part that already went through the open source thingy, because some of them are really, really having a problem with it. But once you've eliminated 50% of them, the other part is like, well, it has to exist because, it's obvious that you need a network effect in cybersecurity. I'm like, you know what? The best proof is that it does not, that network effect are everything but discrete. if it's a network effect, you know about it already. I mean, that's the point of
Yeah.
network effects. So if you don't know about it, it's because it doesn't exist already. That's period. And they were like, okay, we'll prove you wrong. And I'm still waiting for that. The other, no, it just doesn't exist. So, and also there's something different here. What they saw that others didn't see, most likely, is that we are analyzing something in a unique way. So there are several networks that are spanning across the world at a world scale. Like, for example, if we take CrowdSec, they're analyzing binaries on a world scale. Nobody can say anything against that. There are so many machines running CrowdSec. Their XDR is great. They are checking into the binaries day in, day out. So they have the behavior of the binaries and so on. So they are doing binary analysis on a world scale. You can talk about like Akamai that is doing kind of a WAF on a world scale, right? The web application firewall. So they see what's happening on a world scale as well. And there are honeypot systems. Some of them are very large, counting hundreds or if not thousands of machines. But they are looking at the background noise of the internet and the automated exploitation of CVEs, right? So these are the three kind of networks that are detecting something on the global scale. What we are is different. We're detecting IP behaviors on the world scale, which is very different. No network does this so far, and even less in an open source way. So what we are doing is we are not saying, I don't know, CV XYZ. We can detect that. We can detect background noise. We don't do fingerprinting of binaries or whatever, but we can detect also logical faults. For example, if someone is scanning a website to buy product automatically and resell them on eBay, you're not likely to detect it with the XDR. And probably Akamai don't care either. It's just a behavior thing, right? There are so many things you can catch with behaviors that are not possible to catch with binary analysis
Absolutely.
or WAF analysis. And we are the only one running a world-scale network of detection of the behaviors associated with an IP address.
And do you believe that malevolent IP address attacks are growing? So why?
Yes. I mean, several figures here. It's growing, but not at a huge pace. I mean, there are a lot of malevolent IP addresses. We see on average 15 to 16 million over a 2-week rolling
Wow.
period. And they are changing at a rate of 12% per week, roughly. So some of them are permanent members of the show. Like if you've not been visited by number 31 Jingrong Street in China, you just do not exist over the internet for the last 20 years. This thing is pinging every machine in the world for the last 20 years with pinpoint accuracy, looking for troubles. But there are a lot of addresses that are just, vanishing over time, or over a week or so. So it's changing a lot. There's only 1.8% that are IPv6 so far, because the product is compatible with IPv4, IPv6. So it's not so much IPv6 yet, but it's growing fast. The trend is growing quickly on IPv6. Over the last 6 months, we saw a 50% growth. So it
Wow.
went from 1.2 to 1.6 very quickly, actually. 1.8, sorry, very, very quickly. So yeah, that's the way, that's the global thing we start to see on the network level.
So see, you're describing a highly dynamic environment.
Mm-hmm.
How do you ensure the accuracy that what you're labeling as being malevolent or has been released? How do you ensure the accuracy of that?
So it's probably, you're touching on the most important point here, because we are injecting block lists directly at the firewall, load balancer, reverse proxy, or WAF level, directly sometimes in your workload that are dealing with the business. So we cannot be wrong. We cannot have a false positive. Okay, we cannot be victim of poisoning. So the two risks we have here is, the first one is poisoning. So someone trying to trick us into thinking that your IP, for example, is bad. But it's a false report. It's a false flag attack, if you want, right?
Yeah.
And the other one is making an honest mistake, like mistaking, for example, the Google bot for a bot that would be stealing your data online. So that would be the two risks we have. So how we deal with it is the following. The network is so large that we need to have a consensus in the network in real time. So it's stream processing. So at any given moment in the day, we have a number of people expressing an opinion against an IP address. And those entities are so different because they're on different IP ranges, or running different workloads in different places, and so on. And they have been installed at different times, that we know that no cyber criminal can get hold of such a diversified network in such a time. And if there are enough reporting concurring on the fact that this IP ABCD is bad, then we inject it in a block list. And as long as the pressure on this IP address is above a certain threshold in the network, we'll keep it in the block list. And as soon as the pressure is going under this threshold, we release it. So it's important to know that you are not considered into this measurement when you're not 6 months into the network. So you cannot spawn like 1,000 machines and expect to be rigging the consensus. So it's an extremely important component of CrowdSec also that we don't want to be perfect. We don't intend to block 99.99999% of attack. We consider that 92, 93, 95% is good enough as long as we don't have any false positives. Because we are protecting you against 92, 3, 4, 5% of attacks directly with a reputation, and the 5% left are dealt with the behavior engine, because we have an agent running on the server that is still analyzing your logs. So if something is not coded by the reputation, it will be coded by the behavior. And if it's a binary related thing or whatever, it will be coded by CrowdStrike, for example. So that way we are not to carry over some false positive and poisoning.
Wow. Thank you for clarifying that, because I'm sure a lot of people were thinking that question, and that's a very interesting way to approach the problem.
Well, we leverage the crowd to the last degree, because since the network spans now 175 countries, hundreds of thousands of machines in different places, different IPs, different ranges, different clouds, different segments, vertical segments like retail, housing, whatever, banking, media, and so on. We have micro certs here. So, for example, IP addresses that are attacking banking segment are probably, some of them are just attacking banking segment and no other thing, because they have developed a specialized know-how to breach into a bank. So if they want to be efficient, they constantly are armoring banks. So if we see the same IP address in a bank vertical, but nowhere else in our users, we know that this IP address is vertically specialized into trying to screw up banks.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's actually so cool. Philippe, what you're doing is wonderful. Very cool concept. I love it. So I know we're coming up. We have 3 minutes left here. I wanted to also give you a chance to plug anything that you would like to. Are you making any appearances? Are you on any books, writing any books, being part of any charity events, running a horse race, whatever you'd like our audience to know.
Well, guys, if you want to be entrepreneurs, it's a path you have inside yourself, right? So you just have to develop it and try to go for it as right after the school, if you have enough connections around yourself and a bit of experience still. But, before you have loans, before you have wife and kids or husband and kids, because then it becomes more complicated to take risk. So there are 2 periods in your life where you can take risk, right after school or after 1 or 2 years of experience. And when you're in your 40s and you already have a buffer money-wise and you can afford to take risk, but you don't have the same stamina. So it's up to you, but I would do it like 2-3 years after school. It's the best moment in your life to take risk and be an entrepreneur. And as for all the listeners that are SecOps or TI hunters or SOC analysts, join. It's for free. It's an army. We are building a bigger army than the one attacking you guys. And it's for free. So just try it. I mean, it's done by cybersecurity professionals. We are bringing a lot of knowledge at the table. And if you like it, you can go premium. That's fine by us. If you pay us with signals, you pay us. If you pay us with money, you pay us. Anyway, we are willing to share this information with the whole world. So join the army.
Fantastic. Well, Philippe, it's been a pleasure having you.
Likewise.
And as you get on with this adventure, would love to have you back as the story develops even further. And we wish you the greatest success.
Thank you, Manoj. I'll be there anytime you want me.